Caffeine versus creatine, the great debate that I kind of just made up right now. But if you are choosing between the two, then let's figure out which exactly is the best option for you. Now, there's a good reason why creatine and caffeine supplements are extremely popular in the fitness world. Unlike 99% of other fitness supplements, they actually work. But for whatever reason it may be, if you have to choose between the two, then you're gonna know exactly which one that is by the end of this video. Now, to help us decide, we're gonna see how they stack up in three major categories. 1, their main benefits, 2, other important benefits, and 3, potential drawbacks. Let's get started right away with the main benefits. Creatine and caffeine are ergogenic aids, which are substances that work primarily by improving exercise performance. And again, unlike 99% of other supplements, which can only rely on just trust me bro, creatine and caffeine have plenty of supporting scientific evidence for this. However, they improve performance to varying degrees. And if you're wondering which is best, then this might come as a shock to you. The answer is, it depends. More specifically, it depends on what you want to improve the most. Generally, for intense and strength-based exercises like lifting heavier weights, creatine is the better option, showing average improvements of about 10 to 20%, notably higher than caffeine's 2 to 7%. The more experienced you are, however, the less gains you're likely to see from both. Creatine being better than caffeine for strength, like absolute death being better than eating a kale salad, is not surprising. Creatine works by refueling energy in our muscles during short and intense physical activities through the phosphagen energy system. So for activities like lifting weights, sprinting, and in my case, doing very shitty deadlifts, creatine is perfect for them. But for endurance-based activities like low-intensity cardio, caffeine tends to be better, with endurance improvements of up to 20%. However, since we all respond very differently to caffeine, improvements can vary quite a lot, with some people even experiencing negative endurance effects with caffeine. Creatine, on the other hand, is more consistent in effect, and that effect is essentially no effect. Sure, there's some pockets of positive data, but overall, the general sentiment amongst researchers is that, due to generally weak outcomes, creatine is not really considered as an endurance-enhancing supplement. We know that caffeine acts primarily as an adenosine blocker, which probably explains its advantage in endurance. It acts on the central nervous system that can benefit endurance factors like increasing concentrations of neurotransmitters like norepinephrine, reduce pain tolerance, and increase muscle firing rates. But now let's choose a winner. Despite the wide variability of its effects, I'd say that caffeine takes the win for this category. It's not as big on strength as creatine, but at least caffeine enhances performance across the board. Overall, creatine is number 2 in my book, although a very close number 2. Now let's talk about other benefits. Caffeine and creatine are 2 of the most studied supplements of all time, and so many benefits have been discovered about them that we can't possibly cover all of it in one video. But some worth mentioning is like caffeine improving focus, alertness, and even mood, and creatine improving memory, depression, and even bone health. But if we're covering more fitness-related benefits, then one major thing we want to look at is body composition. Things like their direct effects on body weight, body fat, and of course, the muscles. And for this, one of these supplements definitely stand out more than the other. First, for body weight and fat mass, long story short, both of them kind of suck. Well, at least in terms of direct effect. There's not a lot of data showing much outside of data that's mostly observational in nature with only associated outcomes. But of course, association is not causation. So sure, they can help you burn more calories by increasing performance, but that's all you can really expect. For muscle gains, however, this is where one supplement stands out, and that is creatine. Creatine has shown to improve muscle gains directly, with gains researchers consider as moderate in magnitude. Caffeine, on the other hand, won't do much for your peaky biceps, at least not directly. So in terms of fitness benefits outside of performance, if we put a bit of extra weight on body composition, then in my opinion, creatine easily takes the win here. But if you do put more value into other benefits like caffeine's improved alertness and mood, which are important, then caffeine might be better. But creatine is no slouch in other benefits either and gets the win in this category, with caffeine still a very close second. So now that's 1 win for caffeine and 1 win for creatine, leaving us with the potential drawbacks being the potential tiebreaker. Honestly, I think the drawbacks themselves can decide the whole thing all on their own, because some of the drawbacks are quite significant. Let's start with caffeine first. Now, initially, I thought, and maybe a lot of you did too, that caffeine tolerance for sure would be a problem. But strangely enough, the science actually has a hard time showing habitual caffeine intake causing problems with exercise performance. But the other effects like awareness and improved mood do reduce with increased tolerance, which means in a way it can still negatively affect your workouts. So tolerance can still be a drawback, just maybe not as directly as we expect. But if you do run into tolerance issues, it also means you have to deal with the drawback of taking breaks from caffeine. No caffeine, of course, means no benefits. In fact, not only is there no benefit, it might actually hurt your performance if you suffer headaches and negative mood swings from caffeine withdrawals. And for some, actually taking caffeine can have negative impacts like increased levels of anxiety and stress, as well as heart palpitations. And of course, we know its potential impact on sleep. Caffeine also has an upper safety limit of around 400 to 500 milligrams per day, which is not too far off from the amount some extra spicy pre-workouts have all by themselves. So you gotta be extra careful if you're already consuming things like coffee and tea and then taking a pre-workout later. And finally, a big potential drawback is that fact that caffeine works very differently for everyone. For some, it can make you perform worse at the gym, which means you actually have to avoid caffeine. Okay, now let's talk about creatine drawbacks. One is that creatine can cause bloating through excess water retention. Bloating is not exactly the best thing if you want to improve body composition or reach a certain body weight. If you want to reverse this, you will have to stop taking creatine, but it can be reversed very easily. Creatine also doesn't work right away like caffeine does. At a standard 3 to 5 gram daily dose, it takes about 3 weeks to see the full benefits of creatine. But you can speed it up to just 1 week by taking 20 grams per day for that 1 week, also known as creatine loading. There's also the potential drawback of hair loss. Now, I do want to emphasize potential a bit extra here, since there has never been a study that directly observed this issue. But the sheer amount of times I've heard people experiencing hair loss after taking creatine is very hard to ignore. Sure, these anecdotes ain't scientific data, but I do think it's worth keeping an eye out for extra hair circling your shower drain after you start taking creatine. And finally, there is a chance that creatine simply does not work for you. The scientific research places the prevalence of creatine non-responders at a pretty huge portion of about 20 to 30%, which means that if you and 4 friends start taking creatine together, then one of you is probably going to take a bit longer to hit that 2-plate bench press. But don't worry, you can always watch my video on hitting a 2-plate bench to help you out. No creatine necessary. So that's all the drawbacks, at least what I consider big ones, of taking caffeine and creatine. And when we compare them, I do think it's safe to say that the clear winner here is the lovely creatine. Overall, creatine is just a lot less problematic and generally much safer to take than caffeine. And with this second win and making it the winner overall, congratulations to creatine. Creatine is clearly better than caffeine. Or is it? If I consider everything I've learned about creatine and caffeine over the years, then in my personal opinion, I think the actual true best option is, well, yeah, creatine. Caffeine is great, and a good caffeine pre-workout does kick in like a mofo, but it does have some pretty rough drawbacks. And being a crappy lifter bro myself, I'm not a huge fan of the lower and inconsistent strength gains. For me, caffeine sits comfortably in 3rd place in my top supplements of all time, with creatine at number 2. I'll let you guess my number 1 in the comments, but if you know me, it's kinda obvious. Creatine takes the win here in convincing fashion. That said, if you ever try to take my caffeine away from me, then you're gonna have to pry it from my cold triangular hands. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a caffeinated thumbs up and share it with your creatine-loving friends. Subscribe for more and let me know what you think in the comments. As always, thank you for watching, and don't forget to get your protein. Hint, hint.